Key points.
1. Magnitude of the crisis. Worsened air quality. Punjab and KP's air is 10 times more toxic than WHO standards, causing a health emergency for almost 100 million people. Economic and health impact. Air pollution causes 235,000 premature deaths annually, reducing life expectancy by 2.7 years and costing up to 6.5% of GDP. Healthcare costs and labor productivity losses exceed $54 billion annually. 2. Past warnings ignored. 2014 World Bank report highlighted Pakistan's severe urban air pollution, but recommendations for reducing pollutants by 70% by 2030 were overlooked. Ineffectual measures. The Smog Commission, 2017, and Judicial Water and Environment Commission, 2019, failed to prompt decisive action. National Clean Air Policy, 2023, and Punjab's Clean Air Plan lack implementation and credible baseline data. 3. Key challenges. Weak monitoring. Punjab has started installing air quality monitoring systems, but other provinces lack such infrastructure. Relaxed standards. National policies have lowered air quality benchmarks, undermining efforts to combat pollution. 4. Framework for solutions. Link adaptation and mitigation. Bust the myth that mitigation is less critical for developing countries. Emphasize both emission reductions and disaster readiness. Prioritize policy implementation. Align National Environmental Quality Standards (NEQS) with WHO guidelines. Avoid diluting targets under nationally determined contributions (NDCs) and develop a robust implementation framework. Embrace global trends. Commit to net zero targets, joining 75% of nations with similar goals. Leverage global momentum for decarbonization. Decentralize and engage stakeholders. Empower local think tanks, startups, and academia to generate data and drive solutions. Incorporate independent environmental data sets for real-time decision-making. Transboundary collaboration. Collaborate with Indian Punjab to address shared issues like crop burning and coal-fired power plants near the border. 5. Recommendations for sustainable action. Urban transportation overhaul. Utilize 1.28 trillion rupees petroleum levy for modernizing public transit and transitioning to electric vehicles, particularly for rickshaws and two-wheelers. Energy transition. Accelerate incentives for renewable energy adoption. Provincial-federal coordination. Define environmental responsibilities post-18th Amendment for unified action. Conclusion. The air pollution crisis in Punjab and KP underscores Pakistan's urgent need for robust climate action. With 2047 only 23 years away, adopting a structured, collaborative, and internationally aligned approach is essential to ensure clean air, sustainable development, and a healthier future. Crux. Punjab and KP are grappling with an air quality crisis that surpasses the magnitude of Pakistan's 2022 floods, affecting nearly 100 million people and causing severe health and economic losses. Despite decades of warnings and policies, implementation remains weak. To reverse this trend, Pakistan must prioritize mitigation alongside adaptation, adopt global decarbonization practices, strengthen clean air infrastructure, and engage collaboratively at local and international levels.
Key points.
1. Current state of the economy. Stabilization achieved. Deficits in the current account and fiscal budget have been managed. Inflation has plateaued after surging between 2021 to 2024. Foreign exchange reserves have stabilized, averting the risk of catastrophic default seen in 2022 and 2023. Growth elusive. Economic activity is stagnant due to high interest rates and tax burdens. 2 million new labor market entrants annually face limited job opportunities. Recovery of purchasing power destroyed by inflation remains distant. 2. Lessons from stabilization. IMF program pattern. Stabilization under IMF programs is typical and temporary, observed since 1988. Stabilization brings initial relief but does not address structural inefficiencies, creating a repetitive cycle of crises. 3. Structural issues hindering growth. State-owned enterprises, SOEs. Entities like PIA and the power sector accumulate unsustainable losses, requiring urgent restructuring. Export base. Exports remain heavily reliant on cotton, unchanged since the 1980s, limiting diversification and growth. Circular debt and power sector inefficiency. Persistent inefficiencies in the power sector contribute to the accumulation of circular debt. Revenue and debt management. Lack of revenue-based broadening leads to reliance on unsustainable domestic and external debt. Savings and investments. Domestic savings and investment rates remain low, stifling private sector-led growth. 4. Need for deep reforms. Privatization challenges. Initial steps like PIA privatization have failed due to poor planning and political infighting. Structural reforms for transition to growth. Efficient management of SOEs. Diversification of the export and revenue base. Reduced reliance on debt by increasing domestic savings and investment. Addressing inefficiencies in power and other critical sectors. 5. Fragility of stability. Temporary relief. The current stabilization, achieved after 18 months of strict fiscal discipline, is not sustainable without growth. Transition to growth. The government's ability to implement meaningful reforms will determine whether stability leads to genuine economic improvement. Conclusion. While the economy has moved away from the brink of default, the absence of deep-rooted changes suggests that the current stability is only a temporary reprieve. Without addressing long-standing inefficiencies, Pakistan risks falling back into the same cycle of crises. True improvement requires bold reforms that lay the foundation for sustainable, inclusive growth. Crux. The economy is not improving but merely stabilizing. As deficits have been controlled, inflation has plateaued, and foreign exchange reserves have steadied. However, without deep structural reforms, such as improving the power sector, diversifying exports, and addressing state-owned enterprise inefficiencies, growth and long-term sustainability remain elusive. Stability under the IMF program is fragile and temporary, and the real challenge lies in transitioning to a sustainable growth model.
Key points.
1. Early encounters and background. First meeting. The author met Khalid Ahmed in 1966 during a stage performance of Anton Chekhov's The Seagull. Artistic and academic pursuits. Khalid acted in a lesser role but was deeply involved in the arts while studying at Government College, Lahore. He later contributed to Urdu literature by translating historical classics, showcasing his bilingual prowess. 2. Professional journey. Diplomatic career. Khalid served in the Pakistani Foreign Service, with notable postings in Moscow during pivotal events like the 1971 Indo-Pak War. Transition to journalism. He left diplomacy to pursue journalism and became a significant figure in Pakistan's media landscape. Helped establish the Frontier Post, contributing to its editorial voice despite its financial struggles. Ended his career as consulting editor of Newsweek Pakistan. 3. Khalid Ahmed's unique persona. Lifestyle and philosophy. Eschewed conventional ambition, preferring simplicity and intellectual pursuits. Advocated for authenticity, often rejecting societal norms in favor of his own world. Relationship with language. A philologist at heart, he reveled in the nuances of language and used it as a medium for beauty and thought. 4. Personal and professional impact. Mentorship and influence. Mentored emerging writers, including the author's wife. A perceptive and respectful critic, reviewing books with a keen intellectual lens. Literary contributions. Authored 20 books and countless articles, marked by their thoughtfulness and provocative insights. His writings reflect his kinship with words, making them his true legacy. 5. Legacy and enduring impact. Final thoughts. Khalid's life and work exemplified the special beauty of language, as described by French philosopher Gaston Bachelard. Though he is gone, his writings remain a testament to his brilliance and intellectual independence. Conclusion. Khalid Ahmed's life was a celebration of language, intellect, and authenticity. His writings, translations, and mentorship left an enduring legacy, shaping Pakistan's intellectual and journalistic landscape. While he has passed, his words and ideas continue to resonate, preserving his memory for generations to come. The column pays tribute to Khalid Ahmed, a distinguished writer, journalist, and linguist, celebrating his rich intellectual legacy. Known for his mastery over languages and a unique perspective on life, Khalid left behind an indelible mark through his writings, mentorship, and thought-provoking commentary. His legacy is embodied in his 20 books and countless articles, which continue to inspire and provoke thought.
Key points.
1. Context and history. Pipeline agreement. Pakistan signed a deal with Iran in 2009 to import gas via a cross-border pipeline, but has yet to lay its section due to fears of U.S. sanctions. Iran's demand. Iran completed its side of the project and now seeks compensation for Pakistan's delay, with penalties estimated at $18 billion. Recurring mistakes. Similar to the Reko Diq mining case, Pakistan's failure to manage international agreements has led to repeated legal and financial crises. 2. Geopolitical dimensions. U.S. sanctions. Pakistan's reluctance to proceed stems from the threat of sanctions tied to U.S. foreign policy on Iran. Western influence. The project underscores how Western geopolitical pressures shape Pakistan's energy decisions. Shifting global power. With the global pivot from west to east, Pakistan has an opportunity to pursue energy independence outside the shadow of Western dominance. 3. Challenges and consequences. Energy crisis. Pakistan faces a widening gas supply-demand gap, making the pipeline project critical for alleviating shortages. Economic risks. Delays and legal battles drain resources in a struggling economy, exacerbating financial instability. Political landscape. Trump's re-election could mean a harsher U.S. stance on Iran-related projects, increasing pressure on Pakistan. 4. Recommendations for a resilient energy strategy. Policy reform. Develop a long-term, sustainable energy strategy that leverages Pakistan's natural resources. Implement policies to manage energy exploration and imports more effectively. Alternative partnerships. Explore financing and partnerships with Eastern powers or neutral entities to bypass Western geopolitical constraints. Domestic infrastructure. Invest in infrastructure for energy independence to reduce reliance on foreign resources. Proactive diplomacy. Address disputes like the Iran pipeline issue swiftly to avoid penalties and maintain economic stability. Conclusion. The Iran-Pakistan pipeline debacle is a stark reminder of the urgent need for strategic planning in energy and resource management. By learning from past mistakes, adopting a forward-looking approach, and strengthening domestic energy infrastructure, Pakistan can secure its energy future while mitigating geopolitical and financial risks. The time for action is now, before the country faces further punitive consequences. Pakistan is entangled in yet another legal and financial crisis, this time over the delayed Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline project, with a potential penalty of $18 billion looming. This situation highlights a recurring failure to manage critical projects effectively, compounded by geopolitical hesitations and a lack of strategic resource management. To avoid such costly mistakes in the future, Pakistan must adopt a resilient energy policy that balances its domestic needs with global geopolitical realities. Key points. 1. Current situation in Balochistan. Rising violence. Numerous attacks, including the coordinated assaults in August, the Ducky massacre, and bombings in Mostung and Quetta, have caused heavy civilian and security personnel casualties. Non-Baloch workers and Chinese nationals have also been targeted, threatening Pakistan's relations with China. State response. The Apex Committee decided to launch a military operation under Azami Istikam, involving NACDA and creating an intelligence fusion and threat assessment center for better coordination. 2. Lessons from history. Repeated military operations. Past military actions in Balochistan have failed to achieve lasting peace. Overuse of force, targeting civilians, and lack of transparency during such operations have historically worsened public discontent. 3. Necessary precautions. Avoid civilian harm. Innocent people, especially families of insurgents, must not face unjust actions, as this could intensify resentment against the state. Transparency and accountability. Transparent procedures and clear communication with the public are essential to prevent backlash and maintain trust. 4. Socioeconomic factors. Address deprivation. Balochistan's poverty and underdevelopment fuel separatist sentiment. Socioeconomic initiatives to improve infrastructure, education, and healthcare are critical to winning hearts and minds. Utilize resources for development. Balochistan's resource wealth must benefit local communities to reduce grievances. 5. Regional cooperation. Afghanistan's role. The state must ensure that Afghan territory isn't used as a sanctuary for Baloch insurgents. Open communication with the Afghan Taliban is crucial, especially as regional players like India strengthen ties with Kabul. Counter foreign interference. The Apex Committee highlighted the influence of hostile powers. Effective regional diplomacy and internal stability are vital to counter their designs. Conclusion. While a military operation in Balochistan aims to restore peace, sustainable stability requires addressing the root causes of discontent, such as poverty and underdevelopment. The state must act transparently, protect civilians, and work closely with regional players like Afghanistan to prevent external meddling. A balanced strategy combining force and development is essential to ensure lasting peace in the province. Crux. The state has announced a military operation in Balochistan to counter increasing terrorist and separatist violence, supported by a revitalized NACTA and a comprehensive intelligence framework. While restoring peace is necessary, the state must also address socioeconomic deprivation and ensure transparency during operations. Collaborative engagement with Afghanistan is essential to prevent sanctuary for insurgents and counter foreign interference.
Key points.
1. The incident. What happened? At Nishtar Hospital, 30 dialysis patients were infected with HIV due to the use of machines reserved for HIV/AIDS cases. A patient with renal failure died due to complications from HIV/AIDS. Root cause. Dialysis equipment was suspected of being improperly sterilized. SOPs were ignored for over a year, including failure to test patients, maintain records, and convene infection control meetings. 2. Broader healthcare issues. Rise of HIV in Pakistan. Pakistan is second in the Asia-Pacific region for the sharpest rise in HIV cases. Causes include stigma, lack of treatment, infected medical equipment, and poorly screened blood samples. Systemic negligence. Poorly trained healthcare workers and absent accountability mechanisms exacerbate the spread of diseases. Underfunded and mismanaged healthcare facilities fail to enforce basic safety protocols. 3. Stigma and its impact. Social barriers. Patients avoid reporting symptoms due to fear of ostracization. Those seeking treatment often lack access to essential antiretroviral therapy. Endemic potential. Frequent HIV/AIDS outbreaks indicate the risk of it becoming a widespread, endemic issue in Pakistan. 4. Required actions. Immediate measures. Penalize negligence in healthcare facilities, including Nishtar Hospital's administration. Enforce strict SOPs and regular inspections to ensure compliance with hygiene standards. Long-term solutions. Increase funding and training for healthcare workers, emphasizing infection control. Adopt global best practices in HIV/AIDS treatment and prevention, including better screening for blood transfusions. Reducing stigma. Launch awareness campaigns to educate the public about HIV transmission and treatment. Promote a pro-citizen approach to ensure patients feel safe seeking treatment without societal judgment. Conclusion. The tragedy at Nishtar Hospital is a stark reminder of the systemic flaws in Pakistan's healthcare system. It underscores the urgency for reform, accountability, and public health initiatives to address HIV/AIDS and prevent future calamities. A proactive, patient-centered approach is essential to ensure the safety and dignity of all citizens. Crux. A catastrophic health crisis at Multan's Nishtar Hospital has exposed severe negligence in Pakistan's healthcare system. 30 dialysis patients contracted HIV due to infected equipment and flouted protocols. This highlights systemic issues such as lack of accountability, insufficient training, and stigmatization of HIV/AIDS. Addressing these gaps is vital to preventing the disease from becoming endemic. Crux. The custodial death of Moise Nadim in Karachi highlights systemic failures in justice and accountability within Pakistan's law enforcement. Despite evidence of foul play, an out-of-court settlement between the victim's heirs and accused police officials undermines the rule of law. Such cases demand state-led prosecution to prevent intimidation, ensure accountability, and restore public trust in the judiciary. Key points. 1. The incident. Details of death. Moise Nadim died in police custody in Karachi earlier this year. Autopsy reports confirmed multiple injuries from blunt force trauma, pointing to foul play. Out-of-court settlement. The victim's sons pardoned for accused police officials, including a senior SP. This raises concerns about the fairness of the process and the influence of police in judicial proceedings. 2. Systemic concerns. Impunity for custodial deaths. Custodial deaths follow a recurring pattern: initial outrage, charges against officials, and eventual settlements. This undermines justice and emboldens law enforcement to misuse power. Pressure and coercion. Families of victims, vulnerable to intimidation or influence, may not have the resources or courage to pursue justice. Allegations of police interference in judicial processes make the heirs' claims of a voluntary settlement questionable. Judicial role. Courts often accept affidavits in such cases, further eroding public confidence in the judicial system. 3. Broader implications. Public trust in law enforcement. Each settlement reinforces the perception of a corrupt and unaccountable police force. Citizens lose faith in institutions meant to protect them when those same institutions are accused of egregious crimes. Cycle of violence. Allowing settlements for crimes committed by state actors enables further abuse of power and perpetuates a culture of impunity. 4. Recommendations for reform. Treat custodial deaths as state crimes. Prosecution for such cases should be undertaken by the state, removing the burden from the victim's family. Judicial oversight. Courts must scrutinize settlements to ensure they are free of coercion or influence. Affidavits from heirs should not override clear evidence of state misconduct. Accountability mechanisms. Strengthen independent oversight bodies to investigate police misconduct. Ensure timely trials and enforce penalties for those found guilty of custodial deaths. Cultural shift. Promote reforms within police institutions to discourage abuse of authority. Introduce community engagement programs to rebuild trust in law enforcement. Conclusion. The out-of-court settlement in Moise Nadim's case exemplifies the deep-rooted issues of impunity and systemic injustice in Pakistan. To break this cycle, custodial deaths must be prosecuted as crimes against the state, ensuring accountability and safeguarding public trust in the justice system. Crux. The custodial death of Moise Nadim in Karachi highlights systemic failures in justice and accountability within Pakistan's law enforcement. Despite evidence of foul play, an out-of-court settlement between the victim's heirs and accused police officials undermines the rule of law. Such cases demand state-led prosecution to prevent intimidation, ensure accountability, and restore public trust in the judiciary.